Welcome to the first edition of me trying to improve my writing and reading. As a dyslexic person, I neglected reading and writing for the longest time, but now my interest has peaked and I want to explore my capabilities by using Substack and YouTube as a way to write and read you my essays. Valerie, a teenager living with her grandmother, is blossoming into womanhood. But that transformation proves secondary to the effects she experiences when she puts on a pair of magical earrings. Now seeing the world around her in a different light, Valerie must endure her sexual awakening while attempting to discern reality from fantasy as she encounters lecherous priest Gracious, a vampire-like stranger, and otherworldly carnivalic folk. Based on the 1935 Czech novel by Nazval, Valerie and a Week of Wonders is a 1970s surreal, gothic, dark fantasy film by Jireš. I'm starting by laying down lenses this essay rotates through. We have historical and cultural context, adolescence, desire and female subjectivity, surrealism as feminist expression, and finally, then and now, the enduring power of Valerie. Valerie and a Week of Wonders has quickly become one of my favorite movies ever made. It's not just a movie about political urgency. It's not only a movie about a coming-of-age story. It's such a piece that is timeless, and we can still look back at this movie today and learn so much from it. But what it has mainly taught me, it taught me how to look at anything in a different way. It has taught me how to look at people, constructs, politic, culture, but also characters, personas, movies, books, anything. It taught me how to look at it in layers. And layers you can slowly unfold. Because Valerie and a Week of Wonders has so many, and it took me a really long time to really unfold all these layers, that it has become such a heavy piece of media for us to consume. And I want to talk to you about why that is so. Valerie and a Week of Wonders was made in Czechoslovakia in the 1970s. In the 1960s, Czechoslovakia was under a communist control. And this communist party really pushed forward realism in art. But this offered no freedom of expression, freedom of creativity. So there was this new generation, this new wave of creatives that demanded freedom of speech, freedom of creative output, and freedom of expression.
The Czechs, like ourselves, are a democratic people, bred in the free atmosphere of democratic party government. This in itself provoked the communists to extreme action, for the people's choice in the May elections would not have swung to the extreme left.
This new wave sought out to capture the contradictions and the absurdities of real life instead of the realism of it, like the disillusioned youth, the social hypocrisy, and the darker sides of this human desire. This movement was so famous, it's got its own name, the Czechoslovakian Film Miracle. And during the 60s, early 70s, all these movies that were produced all had such a surrealistic, dreamlike feel to it. Because you wasn't allowed to have public speech on this social construct that communist control is. The reason for their surrealism is because they all wanted a comment on this communist control without literally having to say it. So within this surrealism is a lot of imagery and metaphors that link back to this control that they were not in tune with. Movies like Black Peter and Loves of a Blonde reveal young people quietly rebelling against the hollow values of the adult world. Or the movie Daisies in 1966 staged anarchic explosions of female mischief and absurd humor, dismantling both social norms and cinematic convention. But what sets Valerie and a Week of Wonders so apart? This movie pushed this approach even further, presenting a gothic fairy tale that feels both timeless and urgently political. In 1967, the Fourth Congress of Writer Union marked a turning point. A lot of authors and movie makers and creative people came together and demanded freedom of expression. And their speech reflected and amplified the society ready for change. paving the way, Prague Spring of 1968, for a brief moment of socialism with a human face. That's what they called it. But this brief moment of hope was crushed quickly when Soviet tanks invaded Prague in August 1968, and reform was silenced. Censorship returned, and artists faced even stricter surveillance. And it's in this shadow of this crack where socialism fails and communism prevails again, where Valerie in a Week of Wonders was made, premiered, created. A film whose dreamlike structure could speak freely while evading censorship. This movie speaks on censorship, surrealism, and religious imagery in three figures. Figures like the Constable, a grotesque vampiric official, are more than just monster. They're stand-ins for authority itself, the kind of power that lurks over you, controls you, demands obedience. His face is pale and bureaucratic at the same time. The horror of a man who exists only to enforce rules and take away freedom. Then you have Gratian, the priest, a man literally cloaked in morality while trying to prey on Valerie. He exposes exactly what religious hypocrisy looks like, using holiness as a mask for violence. And finally Elsa, Valerie's grandmother who transforms into a vampire, becomes a chilling metaphor for how the older generation feeds off the young, desperate to hold on to relevance, and even if it means destroying the innocence. None of these characters are subtle, by the way. They're all grotesque, exaggerated, and absurd. That's the point. Jireš uses them to rip off the mask of politics, patriarchy, and the church, showing their corruption as monstrous and ridiculous all at once. But the film doesn't just point fingers at monsters, it also dives into the terrifying electric chaos of adolescence itself. Valerie's story doesn't move in a straightforward line. I mean, time folds in on itself, people change identities, and realities dissolve. And that exactly is what being 13 feels like. It's confusing and it's magical and sometimes horrifying. But 1 second you're a child, and the next you're staring down desire, fear, and power that you don't understand yet. That's why Valerie just feels so alive. It takes seriously the intensity of girlhood without softening it or making it a moral lesson.
Ale já se s tebou, má Pane, na místě anděla strážného skláním se k tobě. A žehnám nejskvělejším olejem tvá ústa, tvá ňatra, tvůj klín. Amen.
Valerie herself is never passive. She resists the Constable, escapes Gratian's grasp, and refuses to be consumed by Elsa's hunger for control. She doesn't fight back with swords or fire. She does it with wit, cunning, and courage. And then, in moments where she chooses softness, like her tender, dreamlike night with her neighbor Hedvika, she shows that intimacy and solidarity can be a form of rebellion too. It's a direct counter to patriarchal control. Instead of fear and domination, Valerie embraces joy, curiosity, and connection. The ending makes this clear. That forest procession, women in white, flowers everywhere, laughter ringing out. It's just some surreal flourish. It's like a vision of a community where imagination wins over repression. But also, it's so fragile. Almost too beautiful to last. A dream that feels like it could be taken away at any moment. And maybe that's the heart of Valerie. Even when the world tries to crush you, imagination, desire, and solidarity keep opening small cracks of freedom. Coming-of-age stories usually want to teach something. Be good, stay pure, don't give in, grow up the right way. But Valerie in A Week of Wonders refuses all that. It doesn't treat adolescence like a straight road where you leave childhood behind and walk neatly into adulthood. Instead, it shows growing up as messy, terrifying, and magical. It's like falling into a dream, where every corner holds both danger and possibility. Valerie's body is at the center of this. The first drop of blood, her period, sets the whole story in motion. In most films, this moment would have been used to mark shame or fear or a lesson about staying pure. Here, it's treated like a portal into a new world. Suddenly, she sees things differently. And everyone sees her differently too. Desire, danger, and power all swarm around her body. But Valerie never becomes just a victim of it. She resists, she flirts, she runs, she plays with power. She refuses to let her story be told for her. That's radical, especially in the 70s, where most stories about girls were told about men, through men's fears or fantasies. Valerie isn't punished for her curiosity. She isn't pathologized or hysterical. She doesn't get dragged into a morale tale about innocence lost. Instead, her desire exists on her own terms. That's huge in feminist film theory, because historically, women weren't allowed to speak about their bodies, their hunger, or their dreams directly. Censorship, patriarchy, religion, they all force women into silence or metaphor. And so, the surrealism here is the dream logic, becomes a feminist tool. Earrings, flowers, blood, vampires, all these symbols do the talking when the straightforward dialogue was forbidden.
Připijete si s námi.
Nikdy jsem víno nepil.
Uděláš dnes výjimku.
But here's where the film really flips the script. Female rage. Valerie isn't a raging character in the way you often think of it. She's not screaming, breaking glass, or stabbing her abusers on screen. Instead, her rage is quieter, sharper, more subversive. She refuses to obey. She exposes the priest's hypocrisy. She slips away from the constable. She outsmarts Elsa. In a world that wants to control her body and her story, her refusal is her rage. That's why the film feels so fresh today. When we're finally having louder conversation about girlhood, how it's been pathologized, silenced, or turned into horror, Valerie shows another way that rage doesn't always explode. Sometimes it survives. Sometimes it dances. Sometimes it dreams. When people watch Valerie and a Week of Wonders, the first common reaction would be, what? What was that? The plot slips through your fingers, scenes fold in on themselves, characters die and then reappear. I mean, objects suddenly mean more than what words around them do. That's surrealism. And in Valerie's case, it's not just artistic style. It's a political act. For centuries, women weren't allowed to talk about their stories directly. Their words were censored, dismissed, or treated as hysterical nonsense. So how do you speak when you're not allowed to speak? Well, you use a metaphor. You hide meaning in symbols. You twist reality until the truth can sneak through. That's exactly what surrealism gives Valerie. A coded language where flowers, earrings, and drops of blood can say things girls were never supposed to say out loud. Take the earrings. On the surface, they're just a trinket. But in Valerie's dream logic world, they carry real power. They protect her. They give her agency. They let her navigate danger. In traditional fairy tales, magical objects usually come from a wise old man. But here, Valerie has them from the start. As if to say, she already holds her own power. That's a direct slap into the face of patriarchal myths where women are passive until someone else awakens them. And then there's the way the film flips the fairy tale formula. Usually the story goes like this. A girl is threatened, she was saved by a prince or a father, or who knows, maybe a knight. But Valerie isn't saved by anyone but herself. She doesn't want to be rescued. She bends the dream to her advantage. She tricks the priest, dodges the constable, wriggles out of danger by being clever and unpredictable. Surrealism allows this kind of slipperiness. In a realistic film, she'd be cornered. In a fairy tale, she'd be punished. But in this dream space, she can slip through the cracks. That's why surrealism here is feminist. It creates a world where rules don't apply, where the expected outcome can be overturned. In real life, patriarchy writes the script for women. Be quiet, be pure, be obedient. In Valerie's dream, these scripts get shredded. The nightmare priests and vampires and hypocrites lose their power because Valerie refuses to pay them by their rules. And that's the punch. Surrealism doesn't just look pretty or strange, it becomes survival. It mirrors what adolescence feels like: confusing, unstable, magical, or even terrifying. But it also shows how women have always carved spaces for themselves. Even when every door was locked, Valerie doesn't break out of the system. She slips right past it. And that act of slipping away, or refusing to be captured, is revolutionary. I mean, think about it, 1970s, representing female desire and agency in a society constrained by censorship norms, claiming her curiosity, fear, and courage as her own. Surrealism, symbolic language, and narrative fragmentation allowed these themes to flourish under reconstructive conditions, transforming art into a tool of survival and resistance. Today, the film resonates more than ever. Contemporary cinema revisits female coming-of-age stories like Raw, The Witch, or Lady Bird. Yet so many stories still struggle to depict girlhood honestly, without judging. Valerie refuses shame, embraces complexity, and models autonomy. Her journey bridges decades. A girl navigating her world in the 1970s speaks as clearly to a 21st century audience as she did to the new wave viewers under censorship. The film leaves us with a persistent question. How do we depict the chaos of growing up, especially as a girl, without making it monstrous, shameful, or silenced? Valerie offers an answer. It's imagination, symbolism, and strategic rebellion. She demonstrates that coming of age is not to be tamed or corrected, but honored, explored, and witnessed with empathy. Ultimately, Valerie and a Week of Wonders endures because it insists that female experiences matter. It's a manifesto for survival, a blueprint for resistance, and a celebration of imagination. Liberation begins in creativity. Rebellion can be subtle and strategic, and the act of creating or witnessing female-centered narratives is a profound act of defiance. Valerie teaches us that adolescence, desire, and autonomy are not obstacles. They are the conditions of freedom. In the end, the Week of Wonder never really ends. It lives in every moment of uncertainty, every act of defiance, and every young woman daring to step into her own story.